Today we're going to take a look at a lot of different examples from rejuvenation pruning. It's also called renewal pruning or hard pruning, but in any case, we're taking back at least half to sometimes 2/3, even 100% of the plant to get it to rebound, maybe more so fit in a location where it's overgrown or there's a lot of dead growth. So there's many reasons we'll talk about why we're doing such hard pruning. Now we are talking about deciduous shrubs, not evergreens. We also want to do this type of pruning when it's in a fully dormant state rather than actively growing. So let's go ahead and get into some of the examples. We're going to start with summer wine 9-bark. Now the 9-barks can build up a lot of dead wood eventually, so I'm usually on a schedule where I'm doing it every 3 to 5 years where I cut back my 9-bark. This is actually a fall picture. Right there you can see a lot of that dead growth building up, and so there it is in the spring, getting ready for us to go ahead and cut that back. And that's the size. We took off about half, maybe 2/3. I think this photo I did take off just a little bit more than that. So this again is in the late winter period, March, April for our area, Northern Great Plains, Zone 4. I have done it as late as May, depending on when spring comes and plants start breaking dormancy. But once that leaf starts opening up, that's kind of your window where you've got to get after it. Okay, there's the summer wines, about 4 to 6 weeks later, and most of the photos on each of them that we're going to show you, it's about a 4 to 6 week progression as we go through the photos. So that's summer wine. You can see, look at that vibrant purplish summer wine foliage. And then we're getting again now into about midsummer, but look at that. Just that gorgeous growth. We're getting some variations on the coloring, kind of a golden mixed with that red. So like I said, when you cut back to 9-barks, that new leaf growth is just something really fun to watch. And there we're getting into the fall, probably closer to September, and we're just getting into that deeper reddish color. Now, one of the things we are going to skip on 9-barks, it takes them a full year to set flower buds. So that first season you cut back 9-barks, you're going to miss that. But look at that. That's the second season after we cut back that 9-bark. So just a beautiful fountain type shaped shrub with that gorgeous bloom on it. And once they're done blooming, this variety of 9-bark actually gets kind of that reddish, really cool looking, well, the flower's done, but it's still very showy. All right, let's move on to Amber Jubilee. With this, another 9-bark. This is in the fall, probably after a hard freeze. So the fall foliage, which is good coloring, has frozen back, and then we're getting into the spring, late winter, that we're going to go ahead and we're going to rejuvenate this. Now, I put this Amber Jubilee in a really tight location, knowing I was going to be pruning this back hard every season. And I bet I've been doing it now over 10 years. This gets cut back where I take off 3/4 of the growth. And you can see we're just going to get some dramatic changes in this with the foliage. This picture, I did go back probably even more after I took that photo. But there you go. As we get into the growing season, spring into early summer, look at that. Just a beautiful greenish yellow. Again, the 9-barks just have that foliage. It's just awesome. You don't necessarily need the flowering to enjoy this plant. And there's so many different 9-bark varieties available. Getting some height to it. Now, even if this plant, if you were to let it go year after year after year, it's probably going to get 10 to 12 feet. So again, I put it in a sidewalk area knowing that was just way too big. So you can do different things with shrubs if you know how to prune them. There's some of that brilliant foliage on the Amber Jubilee. It's just a stunning little 9-bark plant. And there's fall. So we're getting into kind of that reddish color again into the fall. So just a great shrub to watch how it changes throughout the season. Let's move on to one of the barberries. Now this is Emerald Carousel Barberry. I know a lot of the barberries have been put onto the noxious weed list, or they're invasive in different areas. So you're probably not going to find the Emerald Carousel very often anymore. There's other varieties that used to be what I thought were great barberries, Golden Carousel, Rosy Glow. You might not find those either. But let's look at the Emerald Carousel for an example of just how showy it can be once we cut it back. Now into the spring, the rabbits had eaten half of this shrub, and there's 3 of them in a location that I'll show you. So I really had no choice but to start over to get kind of a uniform look. Now we used a Loppers. A Loppers is a tool. You're going to want to make sure that you get in there because there's just a ton of thorns on barberries, and I don't know how rabbits eat those with that many thorns. There's the rejuvenation complete. Again, took off at least half, maybe 2/3 of these shrubs on the barberry. You can show just a little bit closer. Now some of these bigger stems, you can certainly, once you get it cut back, you can go a little bit deeper in on them. I always like to leave some stem material, and that's rejuvenation process going to happen from latent buds. We'll talk about that a little bit more on some of the other shrubs. But if you bring it all the way to the ground, you're going to get new growth, but it might be a little, let's say it's not going to be as strong. Whereas if you've got some of the rigid stems that you leave, hence, you know, keeping at least 12 inches is good. I shoot for the 12 to 18 inch area on most shrubs. Here it is. You can see that growth is coming from the latent buds. This is actually a different emerald carousel that I also cut back in a mulch bed, but I didn't have an example on that other group. But wow, look at that. Even just a couple months later, with that powerful root system underneath it, it's an established plant. It's coming in great because the conditions here are good. It's in a healthy state, growing well in this bed. And there, look at that. The blooms on that eventually. Now, this is into the second season. I've read varying opinions on whether or not the barberries bloom on new wood or old wood. And I don't remember that rejuvenation that I did on that one. I don't remember seeing flowers that same season. So again, on all these shrubs we're talking about, do a little bit of research before you cut yours back. I'm just using these as examples that have worked incredibly well for me when we're talking about hard pruning. And there's a emerald carousel that's probably, you know, I would say hasn't been touched in many, many years, probably over 10 years. This is probably pushing like 8 feet tall. So that's just an example of, you can leave shrubs too if you've got the space, but eventually if they start getting that dead wood, that's sometimes when you want to start pruning them back hard. Little lamb hydrangea. I'm going to give you several examples here on the hydrangeas that bloom on new wood mostly, but there are hydrangeas that bloom on both new and old. I get just plenty of blooms on the new wood. This is also in a tight location, that little lamb coming out of winter now, so we're into that late winter, early spring. Cut it back again to about 18 inches. As you can see here, look at that, we're getting some nice growth as we get into probably about the mid-May. Temperatures are starting to warm up, and it's really just a matter of sometimes a week how quickly that growth starts coming on. Look at that. Now we're back to a shrub that looks great. When we were looking at this one, you know, you're not too sure. You're thinking, what have I done? But the little lamb's a great one. Look at that, coming in nice. And then we start getting the bloom into late summer, late July, August in our area. Sometimes the problem with plants that have a bigger flower is that new growth is going to come out and not be as strong. And that's kind of the case on this little lamb. It tends to fold over a little bit more than I like. But look at that. That's why it's called little lamb. If you look closely there, you got the little white snout, cut a couple ears back there, and then kind of get that pinkish color after the white. Now we're going to come up on Limelight Hydrangea. Just absolutely one of my favorite hydrangeas in our landscape because it's just in a focal point. We can see it from a lot of different angles. I always like to leave those spent flowers on in the fall, and I typically only prune this late winter after I've enjoyed that all winter long. Okay, so now we're going to get into the first part of, I think we're into March, maybe April on this, and the deer have come in and kind of beat it up. They did some browsing on it. The flowers now, after wind and everything else that happens in winter, the spent flowers aren't looking as good anymore. So we went ahead, we cut this back again to about that 18-inch to 2-foot level. And there you go. About a couple months later, beautiful new foliage coming in, just outstanding. Look at that, how it's just filled in dramatically over just a 2 to 3 month period. There's some of the new flowers that start forming on that new wood, same season, you know, and eventually, wow, look at that. Just incredible how quickly they can redevelop themselves depending on the shrub, and just beautiful, beautiful white. A little bit of a closer photo though next to that gazebo, you know, isn't that just a nice little setting there? And then eventually the limelight also picks up kind of a pinkish hue as it progresses through the season. And then, you know, we eventually just get back into that nice dried flower look that we can enjoy all through the winter. Okay, this is Quickfire. Quickfire Hydrangea's got a little bit different bloom, a little bit looser, more open flower. And you can see I've got 3 of them, and I planted them like pretty close on purpose. Looking at that, you'd think they'd be kept apart, but no, they blend together just beautifully. Look at that. Flowers are just starting to come on here. Another one, just look at how tight they are. And again, just a little bit looser flower. It's going to start out this little bit of a whitish. And eventually this one also is going to turn pinkish. But I do want to mention, I've got another video you might want to check out. It's on shrubs that are great pollinator attractors. And I think Quickfire is probably in my area #1. I mean, there's just, this shrub brings in so many different pollinators. I just have to show you here. Look at this. This is in slow motion, but it's like a Star Wars movie going on here with insects. I can spend sometimes an hour out here just filming it, zooming in. It's just incredible. So Quickfire, if you like pollinators drawn into your gardens, you want to do Quickfire for sure. Another photo, just that beautiful white, got a backdrop there with that purple Canada red cherry. So just a nice setting. Carl Forrester grass, you know, peeking over the top. There we go. We're getting into the pink now, and almost a complete hedge on that thing. It's fantastic. Close up of the pink flower. They're starting to finish up. You know, something I did this year, I did not cut the Quickfire back. First time in probably 7 years that I didn't bring it back at least halfway. And these are all spent, dead flower stems from the last season. Even though they look like they're alive with that white flower, that's all dead tissue. What I did is I let that green growth, or the new growth, just slowly work its way up, and it was kind of fun to watch. I kind of liked the look of it, but I didn't get nearly the flowering on this plant that year by doing that. So, you know, either way, it's fun to experiment, and that's what I do. Bobo Hydrangea, we'll quick mention that, same thing as Limelight. You got nice winter interest on it. We cut it back about halfway, starts flushing out that growth, setting the flower buds. You can enjoy it, you know, at least, you know, 4 to 6 weeks sometimes with those nice white flowers. And then eventually this one's the same thing. It's going to start turning into that pinkish. You can see that white, big, thick flowers, but Bobo's a nice one. Into that 2 to 3 foot range, it's supposed to say. I don't think it's going to get over 4 foot for me. Look at that mess. This is Bloomerang Lilac. And now I appreciate some of the newer lilac varieties. Well, maybe they're not new, but the old common or vulgaris species, a little bit different to deal with. But Bloomerang, a little bit newer on the scene in the nursery trade. You're going to get blooms on that new wood and old wood, and that's the older lilacs. It was always just on the old wood, so you had to wait a full season to see the lilac blooms anytime you prune back a lilac heart. But Bloomerang is excellent for rejuvenating. This had never been done, probably over about a 4 to 5 year period, but eventually it just got, you know, too thick, too gnarly, so we went ahead and we cut that back. Over half, maybe 2/3. And here's the latent buds that I was talking about, and that's why sometimes you want to leave some of the stems there. Those buds are going to reemerge. You've got a strong, stout little branch that's going to hold that new growth in place. But the Bloomerang, look at that, coming in quick, probably that's about a month later. And then boom, another month later, just a beautiful small shrub. These are aggressive, these are fast growers. And then this is getting in towards the end of the season. We're probably getting into September there. And now look at that. We've even on the Bloomerang, the new growth, we've got some of the different little lilac blooms forming. But next year, we did not prune this back. We just let it finish like that, and we kept it as it is, and there you go. Put on more, even more growth. This is getting into the fall. The spring was even more showy than this. But that Bloomerang, you get that repeat bloom all season long. There's a close-up of that Bloomerang flower. Okay, this is wow, this was a project. I had to prune back these dwarf Korean lilacs. It had probably never been done. I'm guessing 10 to 15 years. They had just been left there. And what you see there, that's just some invasive grapevines, nightshade vines that were consuming and really just kind of destroying the plant overall. It wasn't getting any summer sun anymore. So we got in here and we did a complete rejuvenation where we took off, you know, over 3/4, probably close to 90% of the growth here. Cut back. I did this one in the fall. I knew I wasn't going to have time, late winter into the spring, so I waited until we got several really hard frosts, and we were probably into late October, November in our area. I felt comfortable then, fully dormant. We cut it back, you know, and there you go. That was midsummer the next season. Beautiful. Just came in so nice. Again, this lilac, not like Bloomerang, it does take a full season to get that bloom. So we didn't have any blooms this year, but next year, these have been setting flower buds all year. This is going to be quite the show in the spring with that dwarf Korean. And there's the fall color of that area there. We had cut back another one I didn't show you right there. So it just really changed the whole effect of the whole area by cutting those back, opening it up. We could kind of see through again. Just a dramatic difference with that rejuvenation pruning. Okay, here's a Spirea, probably gold mound spirea. My guess, this has never ever been pruned. I'm betting in maybe close to 10 or 15 years. And this is what happens to spireas. They'll hang in there, they'll live, but eventually spireas, most of them all like a really good haircut. If I come across a spirea like this, there's probably 50% of it is just dead growth in there. This is one, look at that. That's probably 80% dead. It's in a commercial setting. Somebody's just kind of tip pruning it. But really what I do, this right here, look at that. That's not a technique you're going to find in most textbooks, but you try to cut old spirea growth with any kind of a tool, and it's tough when it's dead. So I just step on it, break it apart. Then you can take your fingers, pull that dead growth out of there, and that fresh tissue that's left, that's the live stuff. And then we just went ahead, at that point, cut that back to the ground. So there it is. Just level. This is Superstar Spirea, not a favorite of mine. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I had 3. I'm down to 1. The other one just kind of just dwindled out at me. So Superstar, I don't know, not so super. But there's that first year's growth on that. You can see there's no stems under there holding it up, so you can see they're falling down. And that's one of the things about going all the way to the ground. You might have to be a little bit more patient with that shrub, do some corrective pruning next season. Here's a gold mound spirea. So that's your other option with spirea. I take off half on this specimen right here. Every year it flushes out, looking great, does its bloom. Next spring, I go ahead and I take it back to half. Eventually this spirea also is going to start building up some of that dead wood in there, and we might have to take it back quite a bit further just to get all of that out of there. Still looking good though. Potentilla, same thing. You can get a lot of dead wood in potentilla. Potentillas are slow to rejuvenate, in my opinion. They will live, they will survive, but typically when I've cut them back, and like this one here, we had no choice, some damage happened to it, cut it all the way to the ground. So next season, there's nothing to really hold up those stems. It took about 3 to 4 months. We were into probably, I think if you look by those summer wine 9 barks, we were probably into that August, September. It did okay there. But the next season is when you can start seeing it fully start redeveloping. So some of the shrubs are going to take a couple years before they look as good as they can. And potentilla, in my opinion, is one of them. You can also just light shear potentillas. You'll get that new growth, fresh flower. Okay, real quick, one more spirea, Tor birch leaf. This is another spirea that you can rejuvenate it if you like. Cut it back halfway. But there you go, coming back, nice white flower. It's a beautiful spirea for fall color. Dogwood, we're getting into one of the bigger ones now. Cardinal Dogwood can get 10 to 12 feet, aggressive grower, once it's got that root system under it. So you can see here, it's just really getting crowded, covering up this little decorative bridge we've got there. So I went ahead, we cut that Cardinal Dogwood back pretty far. What's going to happen on this dogwood next time I cut it back, has probably been 3 years since this photo. There's going to be a lot of the main stems in here. You can see, look at that discoloration, and we're going to go back to the ground. We'll try to get in there best we can with a pruning saw. We'll take out some of the major canes. But if you're after that red twig growth, yellow twig growth that we get from dogwoods, you know what, the fresh growth is always the best. So once we rejuvenated that plant, that fresh growth started coming. You know, we get the white flowers on that new growth with the dogwood, and this thing filled out quickly. This might be into the second season, that big, but you know, eventually there you go. We're getting into the fall. We leave those red twigs on all the way through the winter, kind of like we did on the Limelight Hydrangea blooms. Like to leave those. It's great for winter interest when you live in a cold climate. Nice to have something to look at in your landscape. Another situation, I doubt this spirea has ever been cut back. This could be 25, 30 years old, maybe longer. I'm not sure, but this is probably the old Van Hoot or 3-lobe spirea, but the property changed hands, rental property, and the new owner, they wanted more security. They didn't want to have these sheltered areas. So November, again, I had time in the fall. We waited till we had some hard frost. You can see it's pretty much fully dormant, and we've gone back about 2 feet. Now I've seen this spirea cut back hard before. It comes back pretty nice, but this is one of the spireas that does bloom on the old wood again. The bridal wreaths then, they'll get that beautiful flowing white flowering, similar to what we saw on that first plant we looked at, the Summer Wine 9 bark, but not next season. It's just going to be a green foliage plant. I have all confidence this is going to come back quite nice, even though it's old. Here's a willow. This is a Shiki Willow, I believe, or a dappled willow, and I've never cut this back, even though the willows are incredibly fast growers. If we were to cut that back, we'd see the same type of habit. It'd come back super fast. I'd probably have more brilliant foliage, but this is one that's got so much space that I'm just kind of watching it, letting it become just a little bit more of a unique looking plant. And that's one of the things about rejuvenation. You're probably not going to get some of that different interesting branching that can happen with different shrubs. So keep that in mind. And there you go, that's just another photo of that willow. Just a favorite shrub. I'm planning on putting all the different photos we looked at here, the before and afters, on my website, thegardenhike.com. That way you can see the progression of each shrub just in one setting rather than paging back and forth on the video here. I'll also encourage you to subscribe to the Garden Hike channel. I've got a lot of different pruning videos on the playlist there that you can look at, and you'll see some of these different ones like the Summer Wine, the Gold Mound Spirea, one of the Barberries, where you can look just at that video where we're talking about how did we do this project, what did we do, what were the steps. I appreciate you stopping by Garden Hike. We'll see you again next video.